Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abbas Nimati. Moving to next slide, which is introduction. This presentation is focused on finding a recommendation that will constructively move the UK forward in driving the uptake of EV vehicles. Norway has been chosen as a case study and a frame of reference for, for comparison with the UK. Norway's success in driving the number of EV registration is the reason for this choice. The question we shall be considering is whether the UK may benefit from adopting some of the Norway strategy and policies. Moving next slide. This an overview of the structure of the presentation. A brief overview of the EU market will show the discrepancy between the Norway and UK in terms of EV purchases and EV charging point distribution. Emission target and policy will be referenced for both regions. Norway advantage for EV buyers and user will be explained, and UK initiative to encourage EV purchase and usage will also be detailed. Conclusion will be drawn and recommendations given for improving UK strategies. Moving next slide. This fact showing the Norway is 33% larger than UK, but its population is more than 10 times smaller. GDP per capita is a country's economic output divided by its population. It gives a good estimate of the standard of living, and it tells us how much the citizen benefit from the national economy. As can be seen here, Norway has a higher GDP than the UK. In fact, it is a 70% higher. Income tax is one of the most important streams of revenue for every government. But although the UK standard of living is lower, it is the highest tax rate is 45%. Moving next slide. The statements here have been designed to personalize the companies between the regions. From the summary, compared to the UK, an average Norwegian citizen user use considerably more electricity and oil. They are also more likely to be in employment. Moving next slide. BEV stands for battery operated electric vehicle. I shall continue to use the shorter EV for electric vehicle. Norway figure for EV registration jumped from almost 10,000 to over 80,000 in the 12-month period 2018 to 2019. This is an increase of approximately 80%. UK figures for the same period show an increase of 50%. Norway is asserting itself as a leading market for electric vehicle. Moving next slide. The UK has a far lower density of charging points, but also lower number of EV registrations compared to the Norway. Norway is a matching, it is a higher EV registration with a coping infrastructure. We can see that Norway has been operating a more aggressive policy for installing charging stations. Moving next slide. In the last 12 months period, UK total EV sales jumped from just over 70,000 to 175,000. This means that there is an urgent need to significantly increase the number of charging stations. The 1.3 billion allocated pound is intended to cover multiple areas as listed here. Moving next slide. Let us consider the Norwegian incentives that have made a significant difference to their EV sales and ownership. EV owners do not have to pay road tax or any parking fees. They are also exempt from toll payment, and EV can drive in a bus lane. Moving next slide. In the UK, there are several incentives for purchase of new vehicles. The plug car grant is worth up to £3,000. Cars are exempt from London congestion charge and from paying road tax. In Scotland, an interest-free loan is available. A recognizable green number plate make it possible to obtain free parking and some access to bus lanes. Moving the next slide. An EV battery is only guaranteed for up to 8 years. Prices of replacement battery vary, but they are still quite expensive. Charging an EV at home is cheap, but many UK citizens do not have to a garage or off-street parking. To charge a battery can take up to 20 minutes. Moving next slide. In Norway, petrol drive cars only represent 10% of total domestic CO2 emissions. Around 9% of households own an electric vehicle, but many of these also own a petrol driving car. But the emissions from high-income family are significantly higher than from the lower income ones. Moving next slide. In February 2020, 10% of Norway cars were electric. And in February 2020, Norway submitted its Enhanced Paris Agreement target NDC. Overall rating by CAT Climate Action Tracker is insufficient. In 2019, battery electric vehicle reached a 42% market share. Moving next slide. Carbon dioxide accounted for approximately 81% of all UK emission in 2018. Then, in June 2019, secondary legislation was passed that extended 2008 target to at least 100% net zero by 2050. The 100% net zero target is highly challenging and reliant on EV cells. The Climate Action Tracker rate the UK current strategy as almost sufficient. Moving next slide. A significant proportion of UK citizens are not available to afford a new EV. The average amount paid for a car bought at the auction was £5,588. Converting these cells into EVs require some serious consideration. More change are needed than just increase charging point of offering tax incentives. Moving next slide. For both Norway and the UK, their emission strategy is not guaranteed to achieve the climate change target in time. The UK has taken the initiatives with the net zero target for 2050, but now must achieve it. The tax incentives offered by Norway produce very good progress in EV cells. This could be a route for the UK to follow. In the UK, it will be challenging to reach a situation where second-hand petrol car cells are turned into EV purchase. Moving next slide. Recommendation. Affordability is still a major issue for many of the population, together with the concern about battery life, cost, and recharging. Recommendations are as follows: to create new strategy to address lack of overnight charging for drivers with only on-street parking, to increase the density and distribution of fast charging stations, to create incentives to encourage less wealth of consumer to buy electric vehicles, to forge partnerships with the private sector for research and development into improving battery range and lifespan. And that brings us to end of the presentation. Thank you very much.